Hey everybody, once again Craig DeLuz here on behalf of The Rundown at SHOT Show 2022. We are in the Beretta Media Zone and we are talking with the movers and shakers here at SHOT Show 2022 in Las Vegas, Nevada, having a good time in free America. That's right, you guys know I live in California, which isn't exactly free America, but I get a chance to hang out and experience and spend some time with some very, very cool folks, including a gentleman who is here representing a group, a place that is my old haunt, my current haunt, a group that I have a very, very warm and will always have an affectionate place in my heart, and that is the Firearms Policy Coalition and Mr. Dan Dement.
How you doing, Craig? Thanks for having me.
Doing well, sir. Dude, it is awesome to have FPC here, man. I was with FPC from the very beginning.
Yes.
And I remember I was they brought me in to kind of do some media, do some video stuff and all of that. And all of a sudden, that's when Gunmageddon hit, or Gunpocalypse. And they were like, hey, Craig, you worked in the legislature for 8 years. You want to lobby? And got a chance to lobby. Anyway, it was a fun time. It's a great organization. So I got a chance to watch it grow from nothing to what it was. To what it was, and now, man, what you guys are doing in particular is phenomenal, just phenomenal.
So you're saying we owe it all to you, right?
No, I'm just saying I was lucky to be there.
I tell you what. So before we go any further, I do want to make clear. When I got introduced to FPC, right? I mean, it was the edgy kid on the block, right? It was like they were doing stuff that like speaking my mind, right? But it was you, man. I have to say, it was coffee with Craig. It was booze with DeLuz,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what, like 2019 SHOT Show? Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was those kind of things that even brought me into it. And I said, I really enjoy what the organization's doing. I started learning more about it, started following, started supporting, and so here I am.
Well, I will tell you, and this is, in my opinion, one of the most forward-thinking and innovative and I think impactful people in gun rights right now is someone who, and Brandon Combs is not a person who likes to have his name out there in the lights, so I'm going to say it, Brandon Combs. But in terms of forward-thinking and the direction of the Firearms Policy Coalition, like, he ramped up the legal team there at FPC and really developed that legal department even before most people really recognized the legal opportunities with the appointments by President Trump and all that we would have to be able to fight and defend our rights in the federal courts.
Yeah, and on top of that, I mean, Brandon being somebody who prefers to work a little bit more behind the scenes, to his credit, he and the other founders of FPC began an organization that is based on the principles of natural rights.
Right.
And it's when we can have a purpose that we know. I mean, we have two distinct independent organizations, Firearms Policy Coalition, which is a 501c4, and the FPC Action Foundation, which used to be named the Firearms Policy Foundation. But because the FPC brand is so popular and is so growing, we wanted to be able to make that connection. And it's two independently run organizations because of the C4, C3 requirements, but we have one unambiguous purpose, and that is to create a world of maximal human liberty. And that is, I think, the core to all the success we've been having, is because he had the foresight, like you said, to found two organizations that were based on a common sense of principle and purpose.
Well, and it's funny, and I will always say I'm a card-carrying member of the vast right-wing conspiracy. But what I always noticed and what I always appreciated about when I worked at FPC, when I was lobbying, I wasn't lobbying for conservative issues. I was lobbying for the right to keep and bear arms. I was lobbying for civil rights. I was lobbying for a principle that Republicans, conservatives believe in, but it wasn't a Republican thing. I worked with Democrats. I met with Democrats. I met with independents. Now, Republicans were more likely to support us on the issues, but I remember there were many times when we had to challenge Republicans because they didn't get it. They thought that because they had an R after their name, they were pro-gun. And when you had to share with them and talk with them about their bill and explain to them why it wasn't really pro-gun, oftentimes, they didn't get it. And I appreciated just how, like you said, focused on the principles FPC has always been.
Absolutely, and it's elevating a set of philosophies, if you will, specifically around natural rights beyond ideology. Right. Because people can get stuck so much in ideology. I'm a conservative, I'm a liberal, I'm a progressive, I'm a libertarian, small L, big L, whatever it happens to be. And I think that not only the success we've had to date, but which by the way, we're 10 years into this stuff.
Right.
I mean, Brandon just shared with us that we are officially on our 10th year going into it. So there's a lot of really cool stuff happening. We've come a long way, but now we see a big vista out in front of us, that we have a lot more work to do, and we're really excited and we're confident because we know, again, we can always go back to our principles and know that what we're founded on is not a set of ideologies that can change. They're like, inalienable rights. Right. Will never change. Your natural rights that you were born with will never change. And the fact that they're not given to you by an individual or a group of individuals, you were born with those rights, that will never change. And those are the guiding principles I think will keep us successful.
Right. Now, one of the things that made FPC really good, well, first of all, there were several things. Number one, the willingness to be aggressive in their tactics, and I'm not talking about like the way in which liberals believe we're aggressive, but really just being willing to go after legislators and challenge them on the policy and challenge them on the thing, and in some cases utilize things like videos and memes to get people's attention, to draw them in, to entertain people, but also to inform them about why this is important, and then providing the grassroots tools for them to be able to call them, email them, and all of that. Now, I noticed though, like I said, there's been a bit of a shift in that there is much more attention being played to the legal aspect and challenging folks in the court. Tell us a little bit about the legal team, because you guys got some sharp up-and-comers on your legal team now that are coming through and are making waves in the firearms and the Second Amendment community.
So absolutely, love to talk about, like you said, it's not so much a shift, but we just find ourselves doing so many more cases because we've hit a tipping point. I mean, there are so many things out there that need the support of good legal counsel, right? And we'll get to that in a second, but I think you hit the nail on the head with something that's led to our success, and that is on the grassroots advocacy side, right? We've recruited a grassroots army that is freaking amazing, right? This last year, if you go to firearmspolicy.org, right, the website, and it is real easy to take action. So if there's a bill in this particular state, maybe at the federal level, I mean, it's one click, boom, you can send out an email, you can get a call going to your representative, and I think it was something like 4.7 million emails were sent out by our grassroots army last year.
Now, let's be clear, it doesn't just go to your representative, it'll go to the committee where they're voting on the bill. So sometimes just because you send a letter one, you may want to send it again, but it's like it's really so direct, so focused and targeted. Anyway, it's always been impressive to me.
It's one of these, again, like you're saying, be aggressive. It's an aggressive tactic where you lower the barrier of entry. You make it very, very easy for somebody who's saying, wait a second, that bill's not right.
Right.
That goes against my constitutional rights. I would love to do something about it, but there's so many steps involved. I got to go look. You don't have to do that anymore. You go to one website, scroll down, find the bill, boom, hit it, submits it to your saying. You can even submit it to different committees along the way. I mean, we take care of all that stuff for you. So it's highly, highly actionable for anybody who wants to do that. So now, that said, we still have a grassroots team doing it. We've been very active, specifically around like constitutional carry. Right, so like in Texas, we had folks on the ground there mobilizing forces to help them get that through. I know Ohio is still working very, very strictly on getting that same thing passed there. But as you said, we've actually found ourselves now on more cases, and some really, really big cases. So I mean, obviously the biggest was a historic win, right, with Miller versus what used to be Becerra, but now with Bonta. And now it's on hold, right, within it because of a lot of the other pending cases. And we're really hoping, again, once domino falls, hopefully New York, a lot of these other cases can get decided and go to the true decision, the true opinions of Heller and McDonald.
Well, and people need to understand, one of the reasons why the cases are so important is, legislators, and I'll use California as an example, legislators, many of them, the anti-gun legislators, they don't care if what they're doing is constitutional or legal. They really don't care, especially if they're in court circuits like the Ninth, where because there were so few justices, it would take it a decade for it to work a case would take a decade for it to work its way through. And judges sometimes will then say, well, but it's been in place so long, so why do we want to change it? And but once you win in court, well, now there's legal precedent. Now you know what the legal standard is. And I think that's why the cases are so important, because if a bill fails this year, they'll reintroduce it next year.
Correct.
Once there's a case making it illegal,
yes,
at least then it's somewhat settled.
Correct. And it goes to a point we were talking about earlier about the strategy that goes into selecting these cases, because you do want a legal team headed up by Adam Kraut, who's our head of our FPC law program. They really do look at it and figure out what are going to be the best cases to help us set precedents, but also go back and force the higher courts to look at lower courts' decisions and hold them accountable to the higher, the Heller and the McDonald decisions. Because, for example, the Ninth, like you were saying, notoriously known for applying different standards to cases that are like just mind-blowing, right? Or even contradicting themselves oftentimes. But then recently, we just filed a cert with the Supreme Court, and that was on the Bianchi case, which is challenging Maryland's so-called ban on so-called assault weapons, right? So just as we did with our historic victory in California and Miller, we're pushing for the same result going through there.
Right.
And the cool thing about that is it just happened just this last week, is that I think Maryland had passed on responding to it. SCOTUS actually is forcing them to respond now. They issued a requirement that Maryland must respond to the petition. And we can't guarantee anything on that, but to know that the court's forcing them to respond, that they want to see that response, we're hoping that's very good news.
Well, one of the things that is highly frustrating is many of the lower courts have seemed like they have almost ignored Heller and not really given it the deference that is due it. And the only thing they ever really reference is the statement where Scalia said that, you all allowed reasonable regulation. And they consider anything, no matter how unreasonable, to be considered reasonable regulation. And then you've got this, I still, and like the whole, what is it called? The standard of scrutiny.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, you create this standard and then you just flat out ignore what it should or should not be.
Right.
And the Second Amendment is treated like the redheaded stepchild of constitutional rights. It's like, look, you don't even need a good reason to violate or to infringe upon it. You just need a reason. And if you can't come up with a reason, judges can do it themselves.
Yeah, it's asinine. I remember in college having a media law professor who was very strict about, what part of no law do these, and he used a very colorful term,
right.
Do they not understand, right? No law means no law. Similarly, shall not be infringed means shall not be infringed.
Right.
There's nothing more to say about it, yet here we are 100 some odd years later after multiple issues and challenging where it used to never even be an issue. But now it is, and now we have the teams to fight it. So yeah, it's a battlefield out there, and we're happy to be out there fighting the good fight for our rights.
What are some of the cases that we ought to be paying attention to?
Good question. So, obviously there's the stack up at the Supreme Court with New York, and then also now that we've seen the movement with the Bianchi case, we're also, it's the assault weapons bans, it's the magazine, capacity bans that we're hoping, isn't going to, we were encouraged by the panel decision, which was in our favor.
Right.
But then, as always, the Ninth Circuit en banc comes back and he's like, no, here are all these different BS standards.
I find it interesting that, and it's literally no matter what happens, here's how it goes. If win or lose at the district level, the loser's going to appeal it to a 3-judge panel, right? In the 3-judge panel, if we win, then the state or the government, the anti-gunners, then decide, okay, well we want en banc hearing, and they get it.
Yeah.
and they win. If we lose at the 3-judge panel, we ask for en banc, and we never get it.
Don't get it, yeah.
I'm just, it's almost like sometimes you're like, okay, because you know that even at the 3-judge panel, you know it's not really going to be based on the law. I can just say that about the Ninth Circuit. It's not going to be based on the law. It's going to be based on their opinions. But then on top of that, then it's like, okay, well, at least we skip the step of, having to actually have a hearing on banc. We just get to go straight to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and I know that in a lot of our statements that we've been putting out, when unfortunately it really doesn't go what we're hoping, at some point you do have to get it to the Supreme Court,
right? Where
it's like, look, Supreme Court, you have to take a stance and make the lower courts, toe the line to your opinions. Because if you don't, what do we have?
What's the point of it?
Yeah.
What's the point of it if you're not going to make them follow the judgment?
Correct.
Now, the other thing that we've seen legally, it seems to be happening, is that a lot of places are now they're like, okay, they're now going after things like that are Second Amendment adjacent, things like speech cases and the ability to have free speech surrounding the Second Amendment.
Correct.
Property or zoning ordinances.
Correct.
That are zoning out
yep.
things like that. I mean, are those some examples? I mean, are there some examples of some things like that you guys are either working on or keeping an eye on?
100% keeping an eye on.
Okay.
Right. So last year, due to the fact that again FPC is growing and we have some amazing folks that are funding us and funding the fight, we were able to file cases in 80% of all the caseloads that we had set out to do by the third quarter of last year. We were up to 80% of that. So that's really good. And roughly, I think we ended the year with about 40 cases, but a little bit over 42 cases I think we finished up with. And that ranges from the so-called assault weapon bans, as well as, everything from purchasing permits to what's really important for us now, and because we think we can make some progress on it, is the young adult issues, right? Mm-hmm. Where so many states you have 18 to 20-year-olds who cannot possess firearms, specifically handguns or even semi-automatic rifles. And so we're really, really looking for a lot of plaintiffs in those cases. We have some that are in the works. Those are areas where we think it would be really, really effective in that. And then, of course, there will always be the adjacent stuff, which even comes down to nonviolent offenders who may have had something happen 20 years ago, but now the burden shifted. The government's putting the burden on them to prove that they still deserve their God-given rights. And where it's like, no, that's not the case. The burden's on the government to prove that this person doesn't.
Especially since we've taken what is a felony and we've expanded it out.
Yes.
And then, now we've changed that again. And yet, and still, those individuals who are convicted of that felony are now still having a hard time getting their rights back. It's like, wait a minute. So what you're saying is, if someone's a criminal now, you're going to let them out of jail. Well, if you're going to let them out of jail because it wasn't that serious of a crime, then shouldn't they also get their rights back?
Yeah. And so we know that we can make a big impact on that, because there are, a good number of people who are great law-abiding citizens today, nonviolent offenders from however many decades ago that are unfortunately treated as second-class citizens. And, again, going back to our principles about maximal human liberty, what we stand for as an organization, we will fight to restore those rights.
Excellent. All right, how do folks follow the work of the Firearms Policy Coalition, whether it be lawsuits or whether it be legislation?
Absolutely. So like I said before, everything is in one place, firearmspolicy.org. You can do your one-click, take action on anything legislative. We also have that you can find it through the main site, but if you remember this, 2ahotline.com, right? So if you ever feel that your Second Amendment civil rights have been, abused or been denied, you can go straight to a website, fill out information. Our attorneys actually look at and investigate, and we'll proceed. We'll get in touch with you if you think your rights have been violated. So we make that barrier of entry really low. And of course, everywhere on social media, it's just @gunpolicy, for any of our social channels.
Excellent. They're easy to find. Dan, I just want to thank you, and thank you for sitting down with us today, and thank you for all of the work that you do. If you get a chance to see Brandon, tell him I said, what's up?
I will. Thank you so much, man. Again, I wouldn't be here if I didn't come across some of your videos that made me say, this is one awesome organization. So thank you.
It was easy to say because it was and still is.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Well, hey, that's going to be it for this episode. We're having a good time. We're still interviewing the movers and the shakers in the gun community, the Second Amendment community, whether they're manufacturers, whether they're policy folks, whether they're entertainers, or just people with fun stories. We're talking to them right here. So, hey, make it a point. Tune in. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and encourage your friends to do the same. We will be back in a little bit with more interviews. You guys take care.